Okay, so in this part we're going to go ahead and tackle this part of the mesh where you basically can pop these little panels out, and that's where your video card and sound card and so on goes in, and you can plug your screen in and so on. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do before we go ahead and model anything is we're going to go ahead and try to break this geometry down on how we're going to go ahead and model this. And we went ahead and done the same sort of technique with the mesh that we created at the front. First we looked at the pattern on how it's sort of constructed, and then thought about how we're going to go ahead and recreate that in 3D with geometry. So the first thing that you obviously notice is that these panels here that pop out are exactly the same all the way across. And also you'll notice that this sort of bumpy panel is exactly the same the whole way across. So surely the easiest way for us to recreate it is that first we model this piece, probably out of two separate meshes. So one for this sort of grill part, and also one for this handle that you push in, and that's how it pops out. And we're also going to go ahead and make a separate mesh for this and just duplicate them down. Now we might go ahead and end up with a little gap in between here, but we can easily go ahead and model that in with just a plane, and we'll go ahead and put it down behind there. When we go ahead and add a shader to it, it will seem like it's all one mesh even though they are separate meshes. So that's how we're going to go ahead and do this. So let's go ahead and first thing work with this top panel, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag our plane like so. And let's go ahead and work on this little extrusion first. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is add two edges here and there, and also I'm going to go ahead and move this down a little bit just so we get more space to work with. And then now we can go ahead and basically put that little cutout in here. So let's go ahead and probably we might want to go ahead and round this off, but it might go ahead and do it for us when we go ahead and extrude this up and so on. So let's just go ahead and block out the main shape first, and then we'll worry about how we're going to go ahead and do this. I think that should be the best way to go about this. So let's go ahead and extrude this out, probably only to about there, and then scale it in just a little bit, a bit more, to go ahead and get this result that we need. So once we have this, let's go ahead and smooth it and see how it will go ahead and smooth. And as you can see, it will go ahead and freak out quite a lot. So we need to add in all these supporting edges so this will hold its shape. So let's go ahead and probably start off with these ones. And remember that these need to be a little bit rounded, so don't add the edges in too close. So I'm going to go ahead and add probably two here, and let's go ahead and add these in as well. So as you see, I'm adding them in quite far so it doesn't smooth too much. And we'll also need them over here. Okay, and I'm only adding one in here, and that should smooth fairly well, hopefully. Let's go ahead and add one here on the bottom as well, and on the top again I'm adding it quite low. Let's go ahead and add the edges here as well for the support, and same thing over here, and I'm adding in these quite close so it will smooth properly. And I might go ahead and add an extra one in here just so it doesn't freak out too much. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and do the other corner, and then let's go ahead and smooth it and see how it will look. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We just need one more here, like so. Let's go ahead and smooth it. Okay, so that looks pretty good. It's still quite a lot rounded. So let's go ahead and move these supporting edges a bit further in, so it rounds these off a little bit more. So I'm just going to move it somewhere here, and then move these two guys up. I think they should round it off for us quite nicely. Okay, so that's a lot rounder. That will do the trick when we go ahead and zoom out. That looks fine. So it's probably a bit rounder in the actual mesh, but because it's such a small detail, it's not such a big deal. Let's just go ahead and add in an extra supporting edge here, because as you can see, this slides up all the way there. Okay, so that should do the trick for us. It's fairly round, and when we go ahead and zoom out, that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and add in the extra detail over here. And if I zoom in here, there are too many edges. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that one, and that one should be fine. Okay, so now let's go ahead and cut this hole in. Again, it should be fairly simple. I'm just going to do it by adding in 2 loops here and then deleting these faces. And when we go ahead and smooth it, it should be fairly smooth. Okay, so again, because this is such a small detail, we're not going to worry about it too much, like how well it smooths, as long as there is a hole there. And I also think that there is one on the other side here. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that one. And again, this one is a bit rounder actually, so we might go ahead and add some support into this one. Nah, I think it will be fine. I'm not going to worry about it too much because it's such a small detail. Okay, so this panel is created. Let's go ahead and move it to the right place. So I just selected that axis and then snapped it where it needs to be. Let's go ahead and move it up a bit. Okay, so that looks great. So let's go ahead and move on to this next part, or we can actually go ahead and duplicate this down if we wanted to. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and move these guys down. So I duplicate it once, make sure it's roughly at the right space, and now press Shift D instead of Control D to go ahead and keep duplicating it, and then I'll just adjust it a little bit each time. Okay, so that looks great. So let's go ahead and work on this next part. Again, the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is create a plane. So I'm going to go ahead and actually drag it out all the way from here. Turn on our X-ray. Just move this guy a little bit. Move these verts up. And let's go ahead and figure out how we're going to go ahead and cut this one in. So this one is quite round, so we're going to go ahead and use the same technique, but we're going to go ahead and round it off a little bit more. So we're going to add in them edges. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and add in these edges, the horizontal ones. And then we're going to go ahead and make it a little bit nicer so it rounds off a lot better. So let's go ahead and add an edge on this side and add an edge on this side. And we're going to go ahead and move this down all the way here so where it stops being rounded off. We're going to go ahead and move this probably halfway, and we're going to go ahead and move this one onto the top of the cut. And now all we need to do is move these verts. I'm just going to move these two, select both of them and then scale them in. And then select these two, select both of them and then scale them in. So you get a nice rounded edge. And now I'm going to go ahead and scale these in. Okay, so now we're going to have to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So let's go ahead and add an edge on the bottom of the curve, one halfway, and then scale these in. Just move this one down a little bit. So select these two, scale them in, and do the same thing with these two. So both and scale them in. And then just to make this a little bit nicer, we'll go ahead and move those as well.
Okay, now we could also go ahead and add in an edge here and then push that out, but because it's such a small detail, this should still work perfectly fine. So I'm going to select all of those faces, and then let's go ahead and start extruding them out. And they should work perfectly fine for us. Okay, so once you have all those faces selected, just hit extrude and drag it out a bit, and I'm just trying to tell how far it's extruded, and it's not that much, probably about here. And then we're just going to go ahead and scale it down a little bit, like so. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now we're going to go ahead and cut in those holes that we need. We should have probably added in the extrusion here first, so it will go ahead and hold its shape. So let's go ahead and actually do that before we go anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead, go back into our side face. I'm in side view, sorry. And delete these faces that we just made, because it will be a lot faster to do it this way than do it afterwards. So once I selected that edge loop, I'm just going to go ahead and hit extrude and scale in just a bit. Go into my front view just so I see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'll push it down this way a little bit and maybe scale it out a bit more. So I only want a tiny edge there, so it will hold its shape. Okay, so once we have that, then let's go ahead and extrude it out now. And we could go ahead and actually round this off a bit more than we did last time. So I'm going to extrude it in and scale it down this way. And then we can go ahead and extrude it one more time, just so we get a nice rounded off result. I mean, again, we shouldn't really worry about this piece too much because it's such a small detail, it will probably never be seen. But just for the sake of it, we'll go ahead and make it nice. Okay, so now I'm worrying about how we're going to go ahead and do these cuts. So when I'm scaling this in, I'm making sure that I'm not going to go ahead and make any issues over here. So now that we have that, just going to extrude it one more time, like so. And now we're just going to have to go ahead and merge these vertices together. So these ones and those ones as well. Or actually we can go ahead and cut this across instead. So I'm just going to scale these out like this. And then we can just go ahead and fill this in. So I'm going to go ahead and select these faces, extrude that out, push them down, straighten them with the scale tool. And then we're just going to go ahead and use the merge vertex tool to go ahead and snap these down. And let's do the same thing on the other side. And these vertices are not merged yet, so I'm just going to select them and merge vertices. Okay, so this way we get a very nice sort of rounded off result. Okay, so when we go ahead and smooth this, it will give us a nice rounded effect. Now for this bit, let's go ahead and cut in the holes. So I'm just going to do the same thing that we did before. Use the insert edge loop tool. And add these edges in, and I'm going to go ahead and straighten them just so they're fairly clean. Okay, so now I'm just adding these edges in where we're going to go ahead and delete the faces. I'm trying not to spend too much time on straightening these edges. As long as they are fairly straight, it's fine. Okay, so we're nearly there. You could go ahead and delete, or I mean not delete, straighten all these edges properly. I'm just not doing it to save time on a tutorial. But for me, it should still smooth perfectly fine. Okay. So once we added these in, we can go ahead and probably just delete these faces, or we could possibly add in these edges, or well, just that edge, to go ahead and make sure it's at the right place. But actually we don't really need that, so I'm just going to delete that edge, and we're just going to go ahead and delete all these faces. Okay, and that will give us a hole like this. Okay, so as you can see, this is quite nice and smooth. We just need to go ahead and add in that supporting edge over here, so this doesn't start going anywhere. And let's have a look at it on the other side. I'm just going to go ahead and add one there as well, smooth this, and we get a quite nice result. So I think we might gonna go ahead, actually they are the right size. I thought they were a bit bigger than we needed, but they are good. So let's go ahead, and we could go ahead and give these a bit of depth really, but I don't think we'll worry about it because no one's gonna really see that. So let's go ahead and create the handles. So we're probably just going to go ahead and use a plane again, and we might go ahead and give it some thickness, but it would be probably pointless, so we'll just leave it as a plane. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag out plane roughly the right size, and notice that I made it a little bit longer than we need it. And I'm also going to go ahead and, well, before we isolate, let's just go ahead and add in a couple of edges for placeholders. So I know that there's going to be a hole here, or a sort of extrusion. I know that it's going to bend here, here, and here, and here. So now with this information, I can just go ahead and isolate this plane. So now all we need really is, I'm going to select all these vertices and bring these up. So I'm just basically just bending this. Okay, so I just went into my top view. I know that this is going to be up to get a curve like this. These two are sort of like this, but I want to leave this flat for our hole, so I'm just dragging this up. Okay, so we're getting this curve, and I think these two guys, let me just have a look at the reference again. Yeah, this edge is up as well. So this edge sort of looks like this. And this goes back down like that. Okay. So this might not make too much sense now, but it will in just a second. So once we blocked out this sort of rough shape, as you can see, we're just bending this plane. Let's go ahead and cut that hole in that we need. So I'm just going to isolate this. And for this, basically, I'm just going to go ahead and extrude in to give us a support, and then extrude in again and push this in. On a little bit, probably something like this. I'm just going to extrude it one more time, like so. Let's go ahead and smooth it. Okay, there we go. There's a little hole. That looks fine. It doesn't look very smooth, but it's perfectly fine because it's such a small detail. Okay, so once we have this, let's go ahead and rotate, because as you can see it's sort of interacting with the plane behind it. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate, push it in there where it needs to be. Okay. So we might have pushed this in a little bit too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and select these faces and then bring it out a bit more. And also I think I'm going to go ahead and delete this supporting edge. Just to get a smooth result. So delete edge, smooth. No, I think we'll go ahead and leave that in. Okay, so that looks fine. I mean, it's such a small detail that I keep varying about it, but realistically, the only thing that people are going to see of it is that, unless you want to go really close up to this panel. So this is going to be perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and just move the corners down of this, so it looks like on our reference. I'm just going to go ahead and move this in, and let's just go ahead and add in 2 extra edges over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add an edge here, an edge here, select all these verts, push these up just to give us a nicer bend. And then I might just push these out a little bit. Okay, so that will do perfectly fine. You could go ahead and give it a thickness, but I'm really not gonna bother with that because people are not gonna see that at all. So once we have this, I'm just gonna go ahead and smooth both of these, group these guys together. Go ahead and modify center pivot. Let's go ahead and snap it to where it's gonna go. And what we're going to go ahead and do next is, just to make sure that it's snapping to the right place, I'm going to go ahead and press insert on my keyboard, select that axis, snap it to the lower vertex here of the plane, and then we're going to go ahead and snap it to the vertex of this plane. There we go, just to make sure that these perfectly line up. Okay, and once we have that, go into our front view, and I'm going to go ahead and select the vertices of these, unsmooth, select these bottom verts and just push it down a bit more to make sure that these guys are going to be intersecting. Okay, select the whole group and start duplicating them down. So that looks like roughly the right place, and again shift D and I'll just move it a little bit. And as you can see, there's a little gap over there, so we're going to go ahead and just push the verts up so they're intersecting. We should have probably just made it bigger and then we wouldn't have to tweak them. Okay, so once we have that, we're just going to go ahead and clean these up. And select these bottom verts on this, push them all the way down. Okay, and then we're just going to go ahead and clean up all of these as well. So it just takes a little bit of time tweaking. It should have been, it would have been faster if on the first one we would have definitely made it long enough. And then we wouldn't have to go in and tweak each one, but then we might intersect with other pieces too much. So it's sort of, either way, we might have to do some extra work to make sure that they fit together perfectly. Okay, so we're nearly there. There's 2 more. And I think we'll wrap this tutorial up right here, and in the next part we'll go ahead and probably start moving to the front, back to the front of the case. So you notice that the mesh is still missing on the back of the case, but you can go ahead and create that with the exact same technique that we went ahead and used before on the front of the case. So there's not much difference between the two pieces. So as you can see, we finished up the back of the case here. Now, yeah, in the next part, instead of moving to the front, we'll talk more about this mesh, but it's technically the exact same mesh that's at the front, but you're going to have to go ahead and make it from scratch. And we'll probably go ahead and create these screws in the next part and the rubber grommet. And then this case, well, the back part anyway, is finished. And then we can go ahead and move on to the front parts and so on. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next part.